Yeah, it's going.
You ready, Tyler?
Yeah.
Awesome. Ready?
Yeah. Okay, so most of you in this room most likely know at least a little bit about Native American history and how it all starts with Europeans discovering North America, meeting the natives, trading with them, taking over their land, that kind of thing. But why is it that history should start here? After all, didn't Native Americans exist long before anyone discovered North America? Well, the reason behind this is because of history being in favor of the Western world and Europeans in general. In fact, there are a lot of things that are in favor of Europeans. And it's topics like this that make me wonder why, after over 400 years, we've still made very little progress concerning the rights of Aboriginal people. There were three main texts which led me to this topic. The first one is a non-fictional novel, The Inconvenient Indian by Thomas King. This book uses both hard facts and satire to get the author's point across, and it deals with many issues such as racism, cultural rights, and how Aboriginal people are represented in society. The second book I read was Green Grass Running Water. It's by the same author, but it is a fictional novel. However, it still has a message behind it because it's about how Aboriginal people have difficulty fitting in modern society in Canada. And the media text is a movie I watched, which is called Black Robe, which is a 1991 film which involves colonialism in Quebec set in the 16th century, and it deals with topics such as racism, such as how the Europeans see the Native Americans as savage people. While it is one film that portrays Aboriginal Canadians fairly accurately, the film itself also suffers from a common theme of having them only as supporting roles, which I will go into more detail soon. And so these three texts only show some of the problems that Aboriginal people in Canada face today. And that's why I decided to pursue more research and discuss several points on how Native rights in Canada are being infringed upon by both the people and the government. So, the first point I'd like to cover is the topic of status. And in Canada, there are some Aboriginal people who are given Indian status, which legally classifies them as Indian. It sounds simple enough, but there are many Aboriginal people in Canada, and even all of North America, who have difficulty being legally recognized as Aboriginal. This is because usually only those who live on reserves are legally recognized as status Indians, while others do not receive benefits that the government would give to status Indians, even if they do need it. In addition, it is also impossible to gain Aboriginal status in Canada, only to lose it. In the past, status has been lost due to things like attending a university or starting a business, where they have no choice but to give up their status. Many have lost their statuses for other reasons, such as law. In the past, many women have lost their status by marrying non-native men, but fortunately a bill was passed in 1985 called Bill C-31. Not only did it prevent this from happening, but it also gave many women their status back. This is one good example of progress, and yet it took a very long time to happen. However, Indian status itself can still have its downsides, such as restrictions that the government can impose on Aboriginal people if they want to. However, when it is done properly and given to those who need it, Indian status can be very beneficial. Another topic I'd like to discuss is property, which is a huge factor which relates back to colonial times. and taking over native lands was pretty much how oppression of these people came to be. In modern day Canada, we have native reserves, which are basically land designated for our Aboriginal people. And while native reserves can be beneficial to Aboriginal culture, they can also work poorly if they are used to violate their rights. There are many reserves that meant for Aboriginal people that are being used for other purposes, which with illegal action taken against them. For example, they've been used for construction projects like dams and houses. In Greengrass Running Water, one of the novels I read, there's a good example of this where one of the characters lives in a log cabin by a river, but the river has a dam being built on it, but they can't open the dam until he moves out of his house. So he's basically living there in protest of the dam. Native reserves has also been used for industries like logging and fishing, which effectively takes away Aboriginal people's resources. Unfortunately, like status, reserves themselves do not work all the time because owning property is usually not a part of Aboriginal beliefs. However, they have no choice but to use the mostly European concept of property thanks to colonialism and such. However, if reserves were used properly, we could make progress for Aboriginal rights. Next, I would like to discuss racism and how Aboriginal people are portrayed today. And racist ideals against Aboriginal people also originated from European colonialism, but they have not gone away and are still prevalent today. Back in colonial times, Indians were viewed as savages or someone who was lesser than Europeans. Once again, Black Robe is a good example of this, where the Europeans see them as lesser people, but the Indians don't see them as greater people. They just think of them as some white guys. These racist ideals also originated from the fact that Europeans wanted to portray Indians in a way that would justify their colonialist beliefs of taking them over. So, what is a portrayal of Aboriginal people exactly? What image comes to your mind when you hear Indians? Like, you probably think of some stereotypes, like maybe a feather headdress or a teepee or something. Well, this stereotypical image has been a prominent icon of Western culture, despite the fact that First Nations people have had absolutely nothing to do with it. The only reason why it is so prominent is because it was created by a dominant society. However, these images are harmful because they provide only a partial and usually inaccurate portrayal of Aboriginal culture. Racism can lead to many other problems, such as First Nations people being dramatically underrepresented in media, usually only playing supporting roles. Again, in Black Robe, all the main characters are Europeans, and the Indians are only used as supporting characters. Even the most significant Indian character in the movie ends up dying in the end. Stereotypes and discrimination also prevent the Canadian government from noticing modern-day Aboriginal issues, which makes it difficult for them to progress further on Aboriginal rights. Some of you may have heard about residential schools. They are a thing of the past, but basically what they were that they would take Aboriginal children from their homes, put them in these schools, and try to convert them to Christian beliefs. They were very notorious, not only for promoting cultural assimilation, but also because how they were abusive and they did not help the students learn at all. The kind of conditions they put students under could almost make it, they could almost be considered labor camps because of these conditions. And while these schools are a thing of the past, the very last one closed down in 1996, and they were very prominent for almost the entire 20th century. 1996 was only 17 years ago. This really shows how progress has done rather poorly in the past century or so. However, even in modern times, the current system of education in Canada is not designed for Aboriginal students to participate or succeed effectively because it usually does not accommodate them. A certain article I once read uses a quote from a book called First Nations Education Policy in Canada, Progress or Gridlock, which provides a good summary of how the education system can be improved. In this quote, to succeed, such education must engage students. It must convince them that an interesting and inviting intellectual future is possible for them because of, not in spite of, their Aboriginal heritage and culture. It starts with the proposition that being intellectually deep is a legitimate and culturally faithful way of being Aboriginal. So legal status, property, racism, and education are only a few of the many problems that Indigenous people in Canada face today. However, I believe that these are the most prominent ones, and working against these will help improve the overall situation. A lot of these problems are caused by the idea of colonialism and colonialist beliefs. If these beliefs were to be removed from society as a whole, we would no longer be held back and we could be more progressive in terms of Aboriginal rights. While there has been over 400 years of little progress, we still have accomplished so much more over just the past 2 decades in favor of Aboriginal rights. Movements like Idle No More are good examples of Native movements in the modern age. Unfortunately, we still need to push forward even harder to make even real progress. But seeing how much we've progressed in these decades, we should keep this up. However, if we fail to do so, progress could stop or even go in reverse. A lack of Aboriginal rights could tear Canada apart, and that's why these people's rights need to be supported by both the people and the government.